Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Building the Foundation webinar series. My name is Tim Hines, and I am the Executive Director for the UEDA, and I will be serving as your MC for today's webinar. So before we begin, I just want to give a few housekeeping announcements. Our webinar today is entitled Starting the Conversation about University-Based Economic Development, and this is going to be the first of a number of webinars that we're going to be conducting using the definitions, principles, and taxonomy that's outlined in our jointly published publication between UEDA and APLU, the Foundations for Strategy and Practice. Again, if you have a question, please make sure that you use the questions feature that's in the right-hand column. We'll have an opportunity to answer these questions at the very end of our presentation. We'll actually unmute all of our speakers, and we will make sure that they have an opportunity to answer any of your questions. If for some reason you're having any technical difficulties, you can use the chat feature that is in the right-hand column. And everyone will be on mute except for our presenters throughout today's webinar. And that's the reason why we use that questions feature in the right-hand column. Information about the Foundations for Strategy and Practice publication was sent out to you via email yesterday, but it can also be found at the web URL foundations.universityeda.org. So in the URL bar of your web browser, you can type foundations.universityeda.org. And today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on the UEDA website within a few days. So as we begin, I want to provide you just a brief introduction to UEDA. The University Economic Development Association, or UEDA, or UEDA, was established in 1976, and it's North America's membership organization that brings together public and private higher education, the private sector, public agencies, and community economic development stakeholders, all together under the economic development sector. UEDA's members work to expand economic opportunity and prosperity within our communities and regions by leveraging education or talent development, research and technology development, and community building and placemaking strategies. And we'll see some of that in our webinar today. Our members include institutions of higher education, economic developers, and the for-profit sector, all of whom are working to improve the competitiveness of their respective regions. Through news and information, public policy, educational programming, and best practice sharing, the UEDA works to expand economic opportunity in our communities by leveraging research, community and campus planning, talent development, and technology commercialization. We're driving some pretty exciting initiatives as well, one of which is the Body of Knowledge Foundations for Strategy and Practice, which we'll hear plenty about today. And in conjunction with that, we also will have a Journal of Economic Development in Higher Education that will be released within a few months. We are also building organizational capacity, and we have a CRM system that's in place that will help to build the foundation for our online presence. We have some great ideas in store for that tool, and will help organize our membership. And lastly, we also have an effort underway to begin to increase our diversity within our membership and make sure that we're representing all sectors throughout. You can find out more information about the UEDA at our web address, which is www.universityeda.org. Now, I'd also like to invite Jim Waddell, who I'm going to unmute as one of our panelists, to give a brief introduction to APLU before we get started with the content for today's webinar. So Jim, take it away.
Thanks, Tim. Do I have a slide for the about APLU? Yeah, good. So APLU is a member organization of 235 public research universities, including land-grant institutions, state university systems, and affiliated organizations, so organizations that have an interest in the work that public research universities do. Our members are in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. We conduct research and policy analysis and provide advocacy for public research universities in the U.S. The work that we do across APLU is organized into three major pillars, one being increasing degree completion and academic success, another, advancing scientific research, and thirdly, expanding engagement. And part of that expanding engagement pillar includes one of the councils and commissions that APLU convenes, the Commission on Innovation, Competitiveness, and Economic Prosperity, CISEP we call it for short, and I work with that commission. And through the commission, we convene a lot of the same kinds of leaders that are involved in the University Economic Development Association. So presidents and chancellors, vice presidents for research, folks from economic development, technology transfer, entrepreneurship offices, also research and graduate education, academic affairs, and so on. So we really bring together leaders from across interests on campus to talk about this idea of economic engagement. So that's really what CISEP's job is to do, is to lead the efforts that the broader association wants to undertake in disseminating effective practices in economic engagement. And we do that largely through what we've developed and call our economic engagement framework. And if you go to aplu.org/CISEP framework, you'll see more about that and the set of tools that's included in the framework. We include the tool that we'll be talking about a lot today that we did in partnership with UEDA as part of that framework. But essentially what we say in that framework is that institutions should know what the university's economic engagement looks like. They should measure economic engagement efforts. They should tell the story of the institution's economic engagement. And finally, and through all of those practices, engage internal and external stakeholders. So that's a little about APLU and CISEP.
Thanks, Jim. We'll hear more from Jim a little bit later in the presentation, so I'm going to put you back on mute, Jim, and I'm going to prepare to open up. First will be Eva Klein. Eva is president of Eva Klein and Associates. She's a past board member for UEDA, and she is a past chair of our Body of Knowledge Committee, which has sort of spearheaded this effort within UEDA for the Foundation's document. We also have Jean Merrill. Jean is recently retired. We were talking about that before the call started, and Jean's enjoying retirement, but was in his university life, Associate Vice President for Economic Development at the University of Idaho. And Jean was also on our board of directors for UEDA. And Jean also served as our Awards of Excellence Chair for a number of years. So we're excited to have Jean take a few minutes out of his day to tell us what happened with the Foundation's document at the University of Idaho. And then you heard from Jim Waddell, Vice President for Economic Development and Community Engagement at APLU. So with that, I'm going to ask Eva Klein to start her presentation. So Eva, you're on.
Thank you, Tim. And good afternoon, everyone. I joined the UEDA board and spent a couple of really wonderful years working with some great colleagues. Joined initially in 2013 and had the opportunity with colleagues to work on something that had become a problem. I had been busy identifying all the 30-some years I've been working with universities on economic development strategies, going back to the earliest planning studies that I did in the 1980s for research parks and then expanding from there. It had come to be clear to me that we are having trouble having the conversation about economic development. We're not able to tell the story very well. We have a problem of leadership at institutions whose interests in economic development vary from very, very interested to not at all interested. We're not getting enough credit from people who provide funding for accomplishments, and that all of this restraint on what we can accomplish had at the heart of it the fact that the very fundamental problem was that we didn't even have a common definition. When people use the term, as I observed during 30 years, economic development, everybody had a different idea of what that meant. And then later the term economic engagement came about, and even that too has been fuzzy. The realm of engaged scholarship, I think, still is not that well defined, although there is a body of work that was done by Ernest Boyer that is, I think, really wonderful, and if you've never read his stuff, you might want to. But in general, there hasn't been a common conversation because there hasn't been a common definition. So we set about to try to remedy that and instantly fell into partnership with APLU on the matter. I can have the next slide. Now, Jim Waddell is going to come back to this framework graphic and comment on it further, but this is the definition now that UEDA and APLU are proposing we should adopt as the definition of economic development and engagement. You will notice right away that it doesn't stray all that far from teaching, research, and service, but with some differences. Sometimes I think of it as old wine in a new bottle or new wine in an old bottle, because obviously we aren't completely trying to upend the entire purposes of what higher education is about. We are trying to give it a 21st century interpretation. So talent, we're now replacing teaching in this framework, is expanded. Used to be that the focus of teaching was largely 18-year-olds with continuing education and other things happening around the edges. We are now talking more directly about a cradle-to-grave responsibility that our institutions have for human capital development, which is the term that the economists would use, or talent development. The research mission we'd like to see interpreted much more broadly under the word innovation as research from basic to applied to product development, but also even broader than that, creative works and the more general matters of problem solving and entrepreneurship. The very important difference is that research may be thought of as the province of research universities only, but creative works, problem solving, and entrepreneurship are in the domain of liberal arts colleges, community colleges, all forms of higher education institutions. The part of this that is perhaps the most changed, can you go back for 1 second, Tim, is place. This is standing in the place where the service mission used to be. The service mission is very clear in land-grant universities, turning around the extension model, but for other institutions, it has largely been very ill-defined and might even include serving on a committee of the faculty senate, all the way to really doing some constituency-focused, outward-focused work. Here, the trick is that there are actually two meanings to this. The most important one is working to create vibrant economies and communities, socioeconomic advances in regions and communities. But underneath that, there is also a narrower definition of place creation, which is the very campuses that our institutions occupy, research parks, innovation campuses, multi-use open campuses. So there are two meanings to that. Okay, now we can move on. The foundations begins with that definition, and then part two is principles of practices in two forms, the programmatic principles and the business principles. You will be able to read this with a little more explanation if you've not already read the document. But I just wanted to comment that it is important that we begin to adopt the principle that economic development is not a fourth mission, as the three circles of the diagram show. It is embedded across all the missions of the institution. It permeates rather than standing alone as a separate enterprise. Next slide, please. One of the other points that I think is particularly important, the two of them that I think are particularly important are 8 and 9. As to number 8, we have decades of work in creating centers and institutes of all kinds, but in my humble but correct opinion, we still haven't solved the problem of transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary problem solving. So we articulate expressly this idea that creating knowledge and applying it really does require fusion of disciplines and their application jointly. Maybe because I was a French literature major, I never forget about the humanities, but this principle 9 affirms that while we're all abuzz about STEM this and STEM that, that's not all there is to this story, that talent, innovation, and place turn greatly on the integration of the non-STEM disciplines as well. Next slide. On the side of the business principles, you can read them here. You can read the more elaborate descriptions in the text of the Foundation's document. I like to call attention to number 5 because it's a pet of mine. For 30 years, people like me have been advocating for more integration of academics with business and industry. And that is a good and important purpose for higher education in our modern context. But I also see signs that worry me. Big money is involved, and whenever money is involved, there is the opportunity, not the necessity, but the opportunity for lapses in people's behavior. And so I think number 5 is very important to reassert and continuously remember that the university is of value to society only to the extent that it is maintaining complete intellectual integrity. Next slide. After the definition part 1 and the principles part 2, the Foundation's document provides a taxonomy, and it has these 3 purposes. What are you already doing? I cannot tell you how many times I have met with people at an institution where nobody could answer the question, what are all the programs you already do that relate to economic development? So understanding that better and knowing the answer to that is one purpose. Then using that knowledge to plan for expansion of existing or for new initiatives is the second. And one that I think is very important and is echoed by what Jim described as important part of APLU's 4 points is doing a better job of communicating accomplishments internally and externally to stakeholders. So the taxonomy, next one, provides these 3 definitions of the 3 main elements: talent, innovation, and place. And then next slide, it provides definitions also of the very critical intersections. What about programs that address both talent and place, or both talent and innovation, or innovation and place? And what we said was that any program or initiative that touches all 3 is an especially high impact or high value economic engagement program. Next slide. Following that, at the end of the document, we provided a template that we hoped institutions might use to begin this process of answering the question, what do we already do? And hopefully that analysis leading to what next should we do, or what else should we do? And then that leads directly to Jean Merrill's comments. You need to unmute. Yeah, good.
Well, thank you, Eva. That was a great overview of the Foundations for us. This slide shows the mapping of the University of Idaho's economic engagement programs to the Foundation document, the elements and intersections. And I've been asked to spend a few moments discussing our mapping and its value. But first, a little perspective. The University of Idaho was founded in 1889 by the Idaho Territorial Legislature. It is Idaho's land-grant university and its primary research university. Throughout its history, the university has been engaged in many ways with supporting and growing the state's economy. In 2009, the university expanded the role of the Office of Research to support and be a point of contact for the institution's engagement in economic development across the state. And I was asked to manage that effort. So at that point, kind of like Eva suggested, we needed to know what we were doing and what we weren't doing and how that impacted our role in economic development, and perhaps more importantly, what our role should not be. So I took on the effort to create an inventory at that point. And part of the effort was to create a tool. This particular taxonomy tool didn't exist. And so with an Excel spreadsheet, I listed the programs that I knew of with a brief description and contact information for the program's leader. When I sought help identifying additional programs, the folks I contacted wanted to know what I meant by economic development or economic engagement. And at that point, we didn't have a good answer. Now with the foundations, we do. And during the creation of the foundations document, I was actively involved with the UEDA and SciCep organizations. And so as the taxonomy section was being developed, I decided to see how our programs mapped to the foundation elements. I hadn't done anything like that with the spreadsheet document. So my assistant, Teresa Dillon, and I identified additional University of Idaho economic engagement programs and initiatives and placed them where we believe they best fit. We also contacted academic associate deans and the vice provost for academic affairs to identify additional programs and validate our mapping. We tried for a comprehensive inventory. We didn't place any value or importance on the impact or the importance of those programs in including them on our inventory. Now, a brief glance at our taxonomy, and as you can see on this slide, the programs are fairly well balanced across the element and intersection. There are also many sub-programs under many of the programs shown. So if you wanted to keep your taxonomy to one page, you need to be a bit judicious in choosing those programs to list. I'm still not sure how comprehensive this inventory is. It should also be noted that, as with any inventory, keeping it up to date can be a challenge. Perhaps, however, since academic institutions tend to be slow to change, it's of less concern, but it should still be a concern. As I mentioned, I work for comprehensive inventory. As you're developing yours, you might create an inventory or a taxonomy for specific purposes that highlight relevant major and subordinate programs. I would encourage you to tailor your mapping to meet your specific objectives. So why go through the process of doing this? What is the value of having an inventory like this available? Well, first, and as Eva said, it's a tool in identifying resources. What does your institution do? But it helps you match resources to needs in your region. So, for example, when the Clearwater Economic Development Association calls and needs help with the Workforce Development Initiative, for example, what programs can we link them with? When the town of Cascade is looking for assistance in developing economic prosperity strategies, if an individual with a new product idea contacts the office seeking assistance, what university resource might help? When your office is the economic engagement portal for the institution, this inventory is an important tool in helping make the appropriate connections the first time. Might also use it to make internal connections. As you're creating the map, you may find related, complementary, or competing programs and initiatives. For example, we found food system-related programs in cooperative extension, bioregional planning, sustainable communities, movement sciences, agricultural economics, and so forth. And as a result, we created a food systems working group to get these folks together, some of which did not know of the others' programs, to look for synergies and collaborative opportunities. Also, you might use it to help others understand how to get involved. As a follow-up to our use of the SciSAP Economic Engagement Assessment tool, some of our faculty and staff said they wanted to be more involved in economic engagement activities but didn't know how. So with the taxonomy, they can find programs to explore. Filling gaps. As your institution defines its role in economic engagement, the Taxonomy Inventory helps identify gaps in resources. So when the Northwest Intermountain Manufacturer Association said its members need help in assessing new product ideas, where do you turn for help? Sometimes you find that you do not have that resource. So is it a resource that you want to create or perhaps outsource to some other entity? Onboarding. The University of Idaho has and continues to undergo a significant leadership change. There's an ongoing search for a new vice president for research and economic development, who will then have a search for a new associate vice president for economic development. Both will likely be new to the institution and will need to know what assets are in place when they arrive. In addition, as your current faculty and staff are given new responsibilities, they might want to use the tool to understand what's available for them to use as well. Boy, I wish I'd had something like this when I took on the economic development point of contact responsibility for the University of Idaho. And in planning, if economic engagement is an important role for your institution, the inventory becomes a tool for informed decision making. I understand that North Carolina State University is using this tool in establishing and managing its ultimate community partnership program and as a model for its evaluation center for workforce development. These are a few suggestions on the value of the taxonomy tool for internal uses and audiences. How about externally? The mapping of your programs to the foundation's elements provides a communication tool, as Eva has suggested, for informing your constituents, stakeholders, government officials, economic development professionals, and others of assets available to them. Tell them what you're doing from an economic development perspective, and is useful in framing impact stories. Behind each program in your map should be a brief description of the programs, intended audiences and customers, potential outcomes, and contact information for the program. When your leadership is out visiting communities or leaders in your region, they are often looking for stories to tell. This inventory is a tool for identifying sources of stories across the institution's foundational elements. When visiting a community interested in issues of place, what resources can be highlighted in the storytelling? If you're talking with a regional technology council, what innovation resources do you highlight? Or your State Department of Labor, for example, is visiting, what talent programs are front and center in the conversation? Your legislators want to know what your institution is doing to support your economy and its growth. The map is an excellent illustration of the many programs and initiatives you bring to the region to promote economic prosperity. I discourage individuals from just Googling the university looking for resources. If they cannot find your portal for economic development, this mapping at least helps focus their search for programs in their area of need. Each institution should have a portal or point of entry for engaging with the institution. Whether it's an office, an individual, a website, or perhaps all of these, it is important to make it easy for your stakeholders and constituents to find and work with those institutional resources to address their needs. At a minimum, in my opinion, there should be a website built around your taxonomy with links to pages with more details for specific audiences, such as faculty and staff, businesses, government agencies, NGOs, etc. Another external use of the map is in seeking recognition among your peers for the great economic engagement programs of your institutions. I'll briefly highlight the UEDA Awards of Excellence program, and then Jim will later discuss the APLU SciSAP related awards program as well. So the University Economic Development Association's Awards of Excellence program recognizes outstanding leading-edge higher education projects and initiatives promoting economic development and engagement. This year, UEDA is significantly revamping its awards program to reflect UEDA's new research on economic development and engagement in higher education. In keeping with the new taxonomy's emphasis on the three core missions, talent, innovation, and place, as well as projects and initiatives that occur at the intersections of these missions. The 2016 Awards of Excellence categories have been changed to match these elements, as you can see on the slide. For more information about the awards program, I would encourage you to visit the UEDA website and view the posted webinar that describes the new awards program and how to participate. Now to Jim.
Thanks, Gene. And I want to apologize for some of the slides jumping around there. It's just so exciting that, I want to move quickly through the presentation. That's not true, but the cursors get stuck, and I apologize for that. So, Jim, it's all yours.
Well, I couldn't agree more that it is terribly exciting, and Gene, that was a riveting presentation. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate both Eva's and Gene's presentations and how they set the stage for all of this work. The work has been, we in SciCep have been, very pleased to work in partnership with UEDA to develop these ideas. And, Eva sort of mentioned that we quickly kind of fell into partnership as the body of knowledge effort got underway with UEDA. And the reason we fell into partnership so quickly is because we found that our organizations were really seeing totally eye to eye on this stuff, that we had kind of the same worldview about how universities contribute to regional economic development. I just wanted to say, just to follow on a little bit on this model of talent, innovation, and place, that I think for us, the way we like to talk about it is that it's kind of an evolution of the core missions of higher ed institutions that we've talked about for a long time, particularly research universities. For a long time, we've used the words teaching, research, and service to describe those missions, and that's fine. Those are the kinds of things that we're undertaking at universities. But when it comes to talking about the relevance of the university or the ways in which the university contributes to the economy, what we really think of those words as displaying are the inputs to the actual work that the institution does in economic engagement. Back at the sort of turn of this current century, APLU, then Nostalgic, had something called the Kellogg Commission on the future of research universities, and that commission talked about the missions of the university with some new words. They used learning, discovery, and engagement to talk about those missions. Those words are good too, but they are also not. They are also sort of at one end of the contributions, and they go a little bit beyond sort of the inputs and start to describe the activities of the university. But as we developed this model and started using the words talent, innovation, and place, what we found was so appealing about those words is that it was moving us much more towards the outcomes. These, at least, are the outputs of the university when we're thinking about the kinds of contributions that we make to economic development. So I just wanted to add that kind of spin on the framework, because I think it's been very helpful in SciCep for us to talk about why the model is important, is that it helps us move more towards what the external stakeholders are interested in. So I want to just talk briefly about something that we've built based on the SciCep Economic Engagement Framework, and including the Foundations document that we've been talking about today. In 2013, we launched a program called the Innovation and Economic Prosperity Universities Program. And the program is a two-part program. One part is a designation where universities can apply to be designated an Innovation and Economic Prosperity University by the association. And then the second part is an awards program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those parts of the IEP Universities program now. The designation process goes something like this. An institution signs up, says we want to do this, and they are asked to undertake a self-study. And in undertaking that self-study, the institution engages stakeholders, importantly, both internal and external stakeholders. Of course, engaging external stakeholders is critically important in talking about regional economic development, because they are the folks that are in partnership with the university and who are benefiting from the kinds of contributions that universities make. But importantly, internal stakeholders are in that mix as well, because of some of the kinds of things that both Eva and Jean have said, that it's very important for universities to kind of bring people together across different areas that are working in economic engagement to talk about where the synergies are, where the opportunities are, and so forth. As part of that self-study and the report that is developed on that self-study, institutions are asked to identify what they're doing well and to tell us what evidence they have for the fact that they are doing well in those areas. And then we also ask universities to tell us to identify areas for growth and improvement. And again, in an evidence-based way, what is the evidence that they have gathered that show them that those are areas for growth and improvement. We ask them then to tell us what their plan for the future is, how they're going to build on those accomplishments, how they're going to achieve the growth and improvement that they've set out to achieve. And then finally, we ask them to engage in an ongoing learning community and work with other institutions that are either aspiring to the designation or who've gotten the designation. So we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback about that designation process. We now have 48 institutions that have earned the designation, and 201, every institution has told us that it's nice to have that little seal to put on materials, and the president loves to tell people that they've been so designated, but the real value in the process is the fact that they bring people together across the campus, talk to external stakeholders about how can we do this better. Similar to UEDA, we have an awards program that follows the designation program. So in the designation program, we're not sort of picking the best. What we're doing is trying to get every institution that's interested in the designation, we're trying to get them to that designation to really kind of catalyze these kinds of efforts on campus. But in the awards program, we recognize institutions that are doing well in these categories. And so we also have a talent award, we have an innovation award, and also a place award. We do not have multiple categories for the points of intersection, but we do have one award that I think there's one more animation here for, that kind of deals with the sort of center intersection. We call it our Connections Award, and we give an award to an institution that is really showing how you can effectively link and leverage across these multiple areas to have an impact. So like I said, we've had a lot of success with this program, and we're really excited about it. I think the universities who participated have told us that they've benefited from it greatly. Unfortunately, right now the program is only available to institutions that are members of APLU. However, we are in kind of early conversations with UEDA about making the program available to UEDA members. And so we hope to get you some more information about that over the coming months. But we are hoping to open up the program on a fee basis to institutions that are not members of APLU. So watch for more news there.
Great. Thanks, Jim. And thank you, Jean and Eva as well. I'm going to unmute the others here if my cursor will show up, which is part of the problem that I've been running into throughout the presentation. So again, I apologize for that. So we'll bring them up. Keep in mind too that if you do have any questions, please use that questions panel on the right-hand side, and we'll make sure that we get to those throughout the course of our Q&A session. So we'll take a few minutes for Q&A. The first is about the research that went into the Foundation's document. What research, can you highlight that you did? How was the committee formed? Who was on the commission to determine what this definition is and how it moved forward? So, Eva, I think you might be best to take that, and then maybe some follow up from Jim.
Yeah. First of all, we did scan all of the previous work that was plausibly relevant to the topic. I can't tell you that it was a project of research as thorough as it would be if we were writing a PhD dissertation, but we did look at, for example, the work that Jim mentioned of the Kellogg Commission. I did read Ernie Boyer's work on engaged scholarship. We looked at some other models. I think, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, At the back of the Foundation's document itself, there is an appendix which includes some selected material from the body of literature that we did review in preparation of this. The second piece of it, I don't know if you would call it research or vetting, was that we took advantage of the UEDA membership, the Body of Knowledge Committee for sure, and then the larger UEDA membership, as well as the APLU membership through CISEP, to send out drafts and get comments, ideas, inputs on the draft. So there were several rounds of that kind of review, and frankly, when you do a thing like that, you're not always sure that you're actually going to get anything helpful. But I think Jim and I were amazed at how many really good ideas. Take this one out, add this one, reword this one. Have you thought about this idea, that idea, came from the members of the two associations. So while I wouldn't call it perfect, we did have the benefit of membership input in the drafting of the material.
Great, thank
Jim?
you. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, well, I'll just add that, in particular, we were interested in seeing how other folks had sort of created frameworks or models for thinking about what are the elements of engagement, and so we included a lot of diagrams in the back of the book, and I think one of the things we say in the publication is, talent, innovation, place, and all these intersections may or may not be the exact framework or model that you want to apply at your institution, but the important thing is to have a model, have a sort of conceptual framework for how you think about economic engagement. And then the other thing I'll say is just not so much about the research that went into this, but that we define economic development, economic engagement pretty broadly in this document. Talent, innovation, and place. I think a lot of folks that I would talk to, economic developers in particular, about this place development thing, they might say, well, we understand your idea that it's related to economic development, but it's not really economic development. I think our members, both in UEDA and CISEP, feel strongly that we should be thinking about economic engagement in a broad way. But what's interesting is that the folks who are the audience for this publication are still largely people who are interested in economic development specifically, and who may not see themselves as people who are involved in things like community engagement, or at our land-grant universities, they may not see themselves as people who are part of cooperative extension. And I just wanted to quickly say that APLU is currently undertaking an effort where we hope to stand up in the next year a new task force on what we're calling the new engagement, where we really try to take a look at this idea that engagement is something that reaches across all facets of the institution and all facets of our communities and stakeholders. And we'll look forward to keeping UEDA in the loop on the work that we do on the new engagement, because I think it's related to this idea that we have to think broadly and connect the dots across different institutional efforts as we do that.
And again, if you're, looking to reference the document, you can find that on either of our websites. I happen to know the UEDA one off the top of my head, but that's foundations.universityeda.org, and that has a little article, an introduction about the Foundation's document, as well as a link to the PDF where you can download it. It's the same PDF on both of our sites, but it's archived there. A question for both Jim and Jean regarding the awards programs and certifications. So Jim, how long does the IEP certification process take to complete, and how much of my time does it take? And then Jean, the same question for you for the Awards of Excellence. So Jim, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. The designation program is a substantial effort. We have not collected data on exactly how much time and effort goes into it. It is a little different, obviously, from campus to campus. We have talked frequently about trying to get some data that we can then sort of speak more intelligently about the sort of the average. What I hear, just sort of anecdotally, when we talk to people about it, is that the first, going through the self-study and the writing of the narrative is anywhere from 6 to 8 months. And generally that includes a team of people at the institution, many of whom are just getting together maybe once a month for an hour meeting or something, but there's generally a person leading the effort on campus. and that person we've heard anywhere from a third to a half time been devoted to this process for that 6 to 8 months. Some institutions have done it in a more lean way, and it is certainly possible. The other thing to know is that it takes 6 to 8 months. You submit then for the designation. You may or may not get the designation your first try. So what we now do is we say to institutions, you have a 3-year timeline. So think about it as, you do the self-study. The self-study is still going to take about 6 to 8 months. You get your submission in. If you end up not getting the designation when you first submit, you may find that you spend a lot less time because all you're doing then is incorporating, feedback from the reviewers and so forth. So it's not like you're going to continue to spend necessarily the same amount of time you did in that self-study phase. Some institutions have just decided not to submit right away, and in fact are taking, a year or so, or even a little more before they even submit the application. And what that allows them to do is actually spend, sort of to lower the amount of bandwidth it takes to get through that process. As far as the awards go, once you receive the designation and are eligible to apply for an award, the awards are pretty simple. I mean, it's a much shorter narrative. You're basically just writing 3 case studies and a little bit of narrative. You don't need to involve a whole team of people at the institution. You're not doing a big self-study. It's just writing up a few case studies and putting those in with your application.
Great. Gene, on the Awards of Excellence?
So on the Awards of Excellence program, I'm not sure I ever asked any of the applicants how much time they spend on it, preparing the nomination. But there's a form on the UEDA Awards website that you just, I would say, cut and paste information into. It talks about, description of the program, who's involved, what's the impact, and things like that. And since it's a program that's in place, it shouldn't take a lot of time to bring that information together for the application. The process is once the applications are in, and you can see on the screen that the ones for this year are due by June 30. So I would encourage you to go to the website, take a look at it, see if you feel like you've got a program that is differentiated from others that you're aware of. Once the applications are in, Jim takes them, creates a collection for those on the Awards of Excellence Committee to review. Towards the mid to end of July, there's a long conference call where the nominations are discussed, and finalists are chosen. Winners are not, but finalists, generally 3 or 4 of the better ones in each of the categories are chosen to come to the annual summit, and you see the dates and location on the slide. And in each of the categories, the finalists make a presentation to the audience at the summit. And it's the audience that actually votes on which of the finalists actually wins in their category. So you're chosen by your peers as winners. But in our view, if you make it as a finalist, you're a winner anyway because of the recognition that being a finalist creates.
Great. Thank you both. And this question is for Eva. So Eva, regarding the Principles of Practice B, which I believe is the Business and Policy Principles of Practice, could you provide an example to differentiate between a healthy alignment of business and university for community-based economic development and an unhealthy alignment? I believe these differences are sometimes minute and inequitable. Consequences are hard to pinpoint and are less often included in the decision-making.
Well, whoever asked that question and I need to go spend the rest of the afternoon together. It's a complicated answer. Let me try.
So they're the lucky winner, in other words.
The question is framed on the level of programs or initiatives or alignment in a way that suggests, big scale activities. I think that there are some like that I can point to, but there also is the concern about on the level of individual faculty members. Let me start with that one first. People have to do research to advance in the tenure process. If they can't get funded from government sources, they are increasingly needing to look to industry to fund their research. I have read just enough scary articles about research studies being tilted because of who is funding them to make me completely convinced that we did it the right way when we had governmental funding covering most of the research that we do, because there is the risk that somebody will change or alter or skew research findings. I worry about this more particularly in the realm of pharmaceuticals than anywhere else. I don't want to take a drug where nobody knows it, but somebody got paid to do the work by a pharmaceutical company, and while it might have been an otherwise good person, they skewed the outcomes of the study to meet the sponsor's requirements. That actually happens. Happily, it doesn't happen very much. So I think on the level of individual people and how they may behave, we need to have the stronger framework in place than I think we have now. We have always trusted our faculty, and probably we can trust 99.99% of our faculty, but I think a framework for that kind of individual decisions probably needs to be re-examined. On the larger level of alignment of business and university for community development and engagement, how do I put this? I've been in higher education for 45 years. My first job was to set up and run a cooperative education work-study program at a private university in Washington, D.C. So long before this whole thing got very fashionable about taking care of industry and caring about their needs, I was in the 1970s working with employers and aligning them with the program. In our case, the co-op program was for credit. Faculty members were involved. So I have a long experience at asking people, employers, what do you want, what do you need, and trying to align with them. That said, I think it is pretty much clear to me that when you ask business and industry what they want, you may not get good answers, or what they want now might not be the same thing they want tomorrow. So I think we have to remain grown-ups in the room as the educators. When you talk to industry about what kind of curriculum should be in the business school or in any technical program or whatever, take it seriously, but also exert the university's prerogative to know things that the business people don't know about future knowledge base and things like that. So to some extent, some of these relationships are about using the input carefully, not always taking it verbatim. And then another example would be in the case of a community college where I'm just helping them with a strategic plan, and I won't say where, but it might be in the same state that Jean's in. I had an interview with the leadership of a very, very, very major foundation, a very influential organization in the region and the state. And we were talking about the fact that this college didn't have much in the way of facilities. It's a startup. It's only been operating a few years. And they actually said that in the modern world, they have no earthly idea why there would need to be a campus at all or facilities of any kind. That why can't higher education just do everything online? Well, I say that if that's a business industry partner's view of what we should be doing, you really better be taking that with a grain of salt, because And I think there should be some pushback required, because I don't believe that higher education can function only online. And finally, there are forces out there that are putting huge investments, so-called charitable gifts, into various institutions. Not the way it used to be in the old days with hands-off kind of attitude. They're kind of requiring teaching of certain things in exchange. And I think that too is a danger to academic integrity. So that while there are 99 bazillion positive reasons for working with business and industry, I think we just need to do it carefully, and we have to know that sometimes there's a moment to say no to something, or that's not right, or we're here at the table too, and this is our opinion. So there's the short version. Can you imagine the long version?
I'll send you that person's information after the webinar here. Or if that person wants to reach out, let me know. The last question, and we'll make it quick because I know we're nearing the end of the hour here. And as we do, I'm just pointing out that we do have some dates of interest up on the screen: the APLU SciSep Summer Meeting and the Awards of Excellence Deadline Annual Summit. If you want more information, there's websites there, and you can reach out to me, and I'll point you in the right direction. Last question is, do you have any recommendations for institutions that do not have a consolidated economic development office to formulate actions fulfilling the principles outlined in the foundations?
Yeah, I'll start. I know a lot of institutions, somebody ends up having responsibility for economic development. A lot of times nowadays, you'll see that vice presidents for research at research universities have economic development added to their title. I think one of the challenges that presents is that sometimes that means that economic development gets defined as technology transfer, and
right,
simply within the realm of research. But I think the key thing is, and this is one of the things we've learned from the IEP Universities program, and hopefully our institutions have learned from going through that program, is that it really is important to engage stakeholders from across the institution who are interested in economic engagement. And what a lot of our institutions have done, we've learned, is sort of create councils or coordinating committees where they have people from across the institution get together regularly to talk about university economic engagement, to figure out ways in which different units should be working together, and to develop some strategies. So I think that that's really important. And also important to have is a framework that everybody across the institution who's doing economic engagement, even if it's just a part of what they're doing, kind of has that framework in mind. Portland State University comes to mind. They have their, I don't remember exactly what they call it. I think it might be called the Engagement Framework. And they, bring people together regularly. They have someone who's responsible for engagement broadly, not just economic engagement, but also community engagement. Which, of course, based on our definition here today, we see community engagement as part of that. But anyway, that kind of coordinating activity with a framework that helps everybody think about it, I think, is important.
I would echo that. Years ago, I used to be an advocate for the idea of vice president for research and economic development until I saw the pitfalls that Jim just described. And again, it's another example of how we've suffered from not having a commonly adopted or understood definition, that it can sometimes, in many institutions, be thought of as only the tech transfer office. So I don't like that model anymore, and I agree with the idea of a coordinating council. If I were in an institution that did not have a position like Gene had at University of Idaho, I would first want to ensure that the president of the institution understands some of this material, or at least the Venn diagram, about just how broad our impact is in the economy and society. It isn't just one thing. And ask for permission to put together a working group under the president's auspices, because nobody will come to your meetings if it isn't coming from a high level. and begin working through identifying what Jean did and talking through this stuff. And ultimately, it might lead to somebody figuring out, God, we ought to have somebody who is keeping track of all of this stuff. An Office of Economic Development is very much like the admissions office or the research office. Everybody knows that's the academic departments that are teaching the students, and it's the faculty who are doing research. But there's an office that kind of pays attention to the function. That's what we need. We need an office that is going to pay attention and be the convener and help people make the connections and be the promoter. So I'd start with a working group and a president who understands why.
Great. Well, with that, we're at the end of our hour, a little bit past, but I wanted to thank Eva, Jean, and Jim for being with us today. Again, more information about the foundations can be found at foundations.universityeda.org. Other web links are in front of you. We will be archiving this webinar and posting it online to the UEDA website and YouTube channel. So that'll be within the next week, and we'll make sure that we send out a notice to everyone here and everyone that may not have been able to participate today. So that you can reflect on it and share it with others at your institutions. Keep in mind that APLU and UEDA is doing this work because of our members and the value that they provide to our sector and to our organization. So please do what you can to ensure that you have considered membership or considered engagement with these organizations in some fashion or another, because we really do appreciate it and rely on that engagement to do what we do on a regular basis. So with that, thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to hopefully seeing you at the next Foundations webinar, which will be in our series coming up soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks,
Thank
Tim.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.